Good afternoon, YouTube. So I wanted to show you another configuration of our flat rate shipping crate that we ship parts around in. So this is a configuration where we have the top and bottom have these three plates that cover the top. So yeah, these are some of the products that my company sells. We designed these. These are drive shaft spacers for Toyota vehicles, and of course I grabbed the wrong size Allen wrench. Yeah, so here we go. What we do is these are our large size spacers. They're approximately 5-inch diameter, and these are drilled in two different bolt hole patterns that match the bolt hole pattern on your drive shaft flange. Since these are kind of heavy parts, what we do is they're bolted down to the bottom of the crate, and then on the other side they've got this raised ring. And so the idea is this looks like your drive shaft flange that either bolts into the back of your transfer case if it's a four-wheel drive, or bolts onto your rear differential if it's a two-wheel drive. So these are mainly for the newer Tacomas and Tundra models. I think those are the ones that use these. There's a recess on this side that fits the mating raised section from the drive shaft. So they stack together. You put longer bolts in, and then for shipping they fit onto these fixtures here, so that keeps everything solid so these parts don't shift around inside. So we offer them in 3/4 inch, there's a 1 inch, inch and a quarter, and also 1.5 inch spacer. And what these are for is to lengthen your drive shaft to account for any suspension lift you put on the truck. You have your transmission here and your axle here. When you lift the truck, those two are farther apart, and the drive shaft has to travel a farther distance. And on the two-wheel drive pickups, that means the drive shaft pulls out of the back of the transmission. And so the idea is you can take one of these and bolt onto your drive shaft to basically lengthen it. The drive shaft stays the same length, but you're just shortening the distance between the two ends. So we have these 4 different lengths, and that's for that size flange. We also make the same things. These are our smaller diameter parts. So these are about, I think, 4¼ inches roughly, and they fit in the same way, except because they're smaller, we can put 3 and then 2 and 3, so we can actually get 8 stacks of parts in here. And then we're kind of limited by how high you can stack pieces in here before you get to the top of the flat rate box. So we can go up, I think 3 of those, we can go up to about 2.5 inches tall, and then still have room for the top and the bottom covers. So yeah, it's quite a flexible crate. You know, we have it set up with all the different configurations of different size parts. So the idea is every time I order a batch of parts, I try to fill this box as much as possible, so because you pay the same price to ship it no matter how much you put in there. This box was about 36 pounds full, and it'll go back empty and be about 12 pounds. And you can see here, even when like when we're shipping these smaller parts, we had to do a little machining on the inside just to get a little bit extra width, because by the time you put one of those there and then one here, you can see it's a pretty tight fit in there. It's a real tight packing arrangement, but the benefit of doing that, one is you get more parts in the box, and then the other thing is by making it completely solid like that and packing it completely full, there's less chance of that box getting crushed or damaged. So yeah, we've got two configurations for these parts. We've got the stacks of smaller round parts that I showed in an earlier video, and then we have some other cylindrical parts that stack in sideways like this, and they kind of lay in there like pencils in a box. If you've recently lifted a Toyota Tacoma, Tundra, pickup, 4Runner, Hilux Surf, any of those models of Toyota 2- and 4-wheel drive trucks with drive shafts, you might need a spacer for your drive shaft. Common problems are you'll see increased vibrations, because what happens is when the drive shaft is pulled apart, there's actually a male and female splines that allow the drive shaft to move in and out. And when you pull it out too far, there's not a lot of engagement of those splines, and then the drive shaft can vibrate. When you're in tight like that, things can't move around as much, but when you pull those splines out to the very edge, you get those vibrations. So we offer 3 different bolt patterns on this spacer. So this spacer is primarily targeted at the earlier pickups and 4Runners up through like 1995. Generally work with these patterns. This has 3 different bolt hole patterns that Toyota commonly used back then. There's 12 holes. You just use the 4 that line up to your drive shaft flange, and then we can also set these up to take either 10mm bolts like this is drilled for, or we can also adapt these for 8mm bolts that the 83 and earlier pickups used. So that's that one. Then we also have this spacer, which works with a lot of the newer 4Runners and Tacoma pickups from 1996 onward. And this one's set up for 3 different bolt patterns. We have a pattern here, and then there's this pattern here that's actually a dual. It'll do a 60mm or 65mm. The 60mm will go to the inside of the slot. The 65mm bolt pattern is on the outside of the slot. And that's 2 common sizes that are on, for instance, the Tacoma pickups. You'll often have a 65mm at your transfer case, and you'll have a 60mm on your rear or front differential. So just depending on which end of the drive shaft you put the spacer on, you're going to have different bolt hole patterns. And then we have this larger spacer, which has a 66mm pattern, 77, and then we can also notch or slot out these outside holes to work with an 88mm. So Toyota seems to always be changing or adding new bolt hole patterns. About 8 different bolt hole patterns, plus the 8mm, 10mm, and 11mm bolt sizes that we can accommodate. So sometimes people get confused by all these sizes, but we didn't make up these sizes. We're just making spacers to fit all the bolt hole pattern dimensions that we are aware of. I mean, you can also get your drive shaft lengthened at a shop. That will run probably several $100s. You think, oh, I'm only going to add an inch to my drive shaft, but you can't just add an inch. What you have to do is take the whole drive shaft, cut out the whole length of tubing, and then replace it with a length of tubing that's 1 inch longer. So you've got to cut the welds at both ends, remachine where you cut the tube off to fit the tubing, then you've got to weld the new tubing into the old part and then straighten and balance that. So it's quite an expense. You know, you would probably be looking at several $100s to, you know, quote, do it the right way. You can add one of these for $70 to $80 typically. You could do this in your garage. You don't have to take the truck to a shop and wait for a couple of days to get them to build a new shaft. You can just bolt this in and be driving in 45 minutes. So yeah, if you have any questions about that, post up in the comment section below, or you can find our link on the web page, contact link there. And as always, thanks for watching.